It's a football Friday. Let's waste no time on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome everyone to the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Hopefully you're having a tremendous Friday. It's time to put our picks on the table. So make sure you hit the follow button. You put your finger on the button to follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your Apple Podcasts. That way you don't miss an episode. And also, while you're at it, go check us out on social media as well. And guess what? Once you do that, you'll go ahead and enjoy some of the great exclusive content that we've been cooking up for you. All right, let's waste no time. This is going to be more of an express lane edition of the pod today because honestly, it's a Friday. I'm feeling like having fun. And also, why not get into some of the picks for the weekend? We're going to start off with one of the big ones, LSU versus Southeastern. LSU is going to win this one going away. I don't think I can say any more than that. Now, I think the biggest question is, how long does Garrett Nussmeier play? Because Brian Kelly has made it abundantly clear that no matter what, Nussmeier is going to start this game, and he's going to play probably for a significant period of time. And that's against probably his better judgment because he's got the big game against Ole Miss next week. And if the injury isn't necessarily healing itself, it's going to be a long game next week that could kind of derail the momentum of this team as we head into the month of October. That said, LSU is still going to win this ball game no matter what. I think Brian Kelly should start giving Martin Van Buren, MVB, the snaps after halftime because I think this LSU team can handle business the right way and win this one by at least 4 scores. I understand that they only put up 23 against La Tech. I think they could beat Southeastern very easily and running away with it. Simply because I think LSU's defense is going to overpower them. They're going to smother the you-know-what out of them. So I think LSU just rolls in that. Meanwhile, we flip it over to probably the biggest game of the weekend in the state of Louisiana, or around it, I should say, because this is at Ole Miss, Tulane taking on the Rebels. I think it's going to be a very tight game. Ole Miss is going to win, but it's going to be very close, mainly because I think that this Tulane team has some good players, has some dynamos, but as we've noticed over the last 3-4 weeks of the season, Jake Ratzlaff can only carry this team so far. They've been able to close out, run out to big leads, but then that lead diminishes and they're able to just hold on by the seat of their pants in the last minute. Jake Ratzlaff is a hell of an athlete, not just through the air, but also on the ground. He could very well be the next Taysom Hill. And again, that's not just because of his BYU roots. He is an absolute stud. So I think that you see Jake Ratzlaff get things done and help this team stay competitive. And I think some teams will definitely be taking notice and looking at this. Again, UCLA is looking for a new head coach. Virginia Tech's looking for a new head coach. Who knows who else is kind of looking at their head coach and saying, I don't necessarily think he's going to get it. He's going to stick around past 2025. Let's just at least figure this out. Again, if Tulane wins this game no matter what, I think a 213 area code is going to be calling him on Sunday morning. And the AP poll damn well should put Tulane in the top 25 if they win that game. If they don't, they'll stick around in around the same spot they do, as long as it's a tight game. So I think we see Tulane lose, but it's a very tight game. So as much as we don't like moral victories here on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast, I think this is one of those where you'll take a moral victory. Now we'll flip it over to the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. They're making the long trip right now to Ypsilanti, Michigan. Take on the Eastern Michigan. There's a guy you might know on that Eastern Michigan team. Not going to say his name, but It's going to be a much more competitive game, but I feel like it's still going to be a loss. Mainly because you don't know if that passing game that was absolutely putrid last Saturday against Mizzou can get better. We will only know once live bullets start flying and the game starts kind of working for Daniel Beal. Again, I kind of think this is a lot like what Brandon Harris had to deal with in the mid-2010s with LSU, because he was quite literally thrown into the fire. One of his first ever starts in college was at Auburn. I know it's not Bryant-Denny Stadium or Stark Vegas or Georgia or any of the other Florida. It wasn't a game at the Swamp. But a hostile environment in the SEC is a hostile environment anywhere. It's tough to play in those stadiums. And Brandon Harris, he had to learn. It was trial by fire. Daniel Beal, it's a trial by fire. And that's kind of been the story of his career so far in college football, having to step up in the Sun Belt Championship game and then in the bowl game. So, like, he's had to kind of come in to kind of be that bridge guy to resolve some issues due to injuries. And once again, he's in that situation. And he's having to deal with a lot of other issues, namely one wide receiver in particular, Shelton Sampson, continuing to have, I think, a case of the yips, because there's no way a wide receiver can have this many drops. I'd be amazed if there was somebody out there that would have that kind of stone hands that's playing college football at an FBS level. That said, you can't just solely rely on Shelton Sampson getting over the yips over in Ypsilanti. Then you have the run game. They're going to be needed to avoid getting demolished by EMU. I think this Cajuns defense is good, not great. And I think they can at least somewhat keep it competitive, but they can't get steamrolled in this game. Again, you have already kind of like lost some of the fan base, not because of, anything off the field or any issues behind the scenes. No, it's simply because of the record and the perceived effort. Again, earlier in the week, we heard Dez kind of say, this team put in effort. And I'd agree with him, but at the same time, it's the perception. And for college football, it's 9/10 of the law. It is all about what the perception was. And you got cooked and you had 4 passing yards. All that makes you kind of think that the Cajuns did not show a lot of effort in that game over Mizzou. They saw it as a body bag game and they kind of just went ahead and rolled over. Not a great look, to say the least, but hopefully they can kind of get back on the right track, or at least start to build towards a good track, because next week you open up conference play and then you deal with a proverbial murderer's row, because you've got the Marshall game next Saturday. You got JMU, Marshall, and then you've got Marshall of the South, Southern Miss. And speaking of them, the Golden Eagles are taking on the La Tech Bulldogs. La Tech's looked surprisingly better. 2-1 to start the season. They covered the spread against LSU, which I think is a win in and of itself for this program. No offense. But they looked pretty good. 2-1 to start the season. But they're playing a Southern Miss Golden Eagles team that is all of Marshall's players that didn't get drafted last year, playing in Hattiesburg, Mississippi to play for their head coach. I think this is going to be the wheels fall off point. I understand that, Southern Miss is a really good team, and I feel like they could win this one by 10 or more. La Tech, I'm sorry, but things are going to start dipping down a little bit more. If you win, that's a huge coup and feather in your cap for beating your former/future conference opponent, because I guarantee you we're going to start seeing those games sooner rather than later being a yearly recurrence, a lot like what it was back in the Gap when they were in the CUSA. Now we'll flip it over to UL Monroe, and this is probably one of the toughest games to call, just to me, because I haven't seen anything that makes me feel like UL Monroe is certified a they're going to beat a lot of these teams that they play the rest of the way. But I haven't seen anything to show me whether or not UTEP is good enough to win in a game. I feel like I probably wind up going UL Monroe wins in a tough ball game. It is a very difficult one to pick out of all of these. So because I just don't necessarily know a whole lot about UTEP at this point, but I think UL Monroe has the capabilities to get a nice win on the board. Why not? Nichols at Texas State. I think Texas State wins a game against the Colonels, but I think this is a little bit more competitive than probably a lot of people think, mainly because in my mind, you're well rested, you're going to handle business the right way. So I think Nichols keeps it competitive and Texas State wins a tight one. Then we go to Grambling versus East Texas A&M, an FCS matchup, but important nonetheless. I'll go with Grambling winning this one against East Texas A&M. It's going to be a good game. I think it could be competitive, but I believe Grambling is going to win that one. And by the way, if you're betting on FCS games, get help, please. Flipping over to Northwestern State at Prairie View A&M. I think Prairie View A&M wins simply because the Demons are rebuilding their program. And that's not a knock against them. It's just facts. You got your first win in 3 years. Great. Now let's start seeing you build off of that. Again, you might get 1 or 2 wins the rest of the year. Now you can start moving forward and saying, all right, let's figure out what we can do to get better. And no doubt in my mind, Northwestern State wants to get back to some form of prominence. And in the Southland Conference, you're already kind of behind the proverbial 8 ball with a team like McNeese and even Nichols. Nichols has kind of had to go through the rough shot of playing these body bag games. And the Tyler Becky era started off really well. It's dropped off a little bit, but they're also kind of starting to figure out this new era of programs. So give that one some time. But I think, Northwestern State, Prairie View A&M could be a lot closer than maybe I'm thinking about initially. Wrapping up the college football slate in the state of Louisiana, McNeese taking on Utah State. I think Utah State wins this one by at least 10 points or more, but it's not going to look as lopsided as some of the other games that have gone so far this season, where it's more than 10 points. Mainly because I like what I've been seeing from Jake Strong. Is he God's answer to football? No. But he's been looking very solid going down from the FBS to the FCS level. Again, you're playing in the Big 12 over at Texas Tech, and now you're playing a lot lesser competition, and you're putting up 200, 300 yards in a game. It's kind of expected, but you got to respect the move to do that and realize, hey, you want to make a big impact, maybe in a smaller pond, and keep playing and spending the rest of your collegiate career in Lake Charles. I think it's not half bad a way to do it. So I think Utah State wins. McNeese looks competitive. So it's going to be overall kind of an up and down weekend for the state of Louisiana in college football. But now it gets to the team that I think everybody's putting their hopes and dreams on at 3:25 on a Sunday. That is the Seattle Seahawks and the New Orleans Saints. I feel like this Saints team has that potential to pull it off. Now, whether or not they actually do is a different question, different conversation. I like what I've seen from the Saints team through 2 games. You're playing against Sam Darnold, who looks completely out of place last weekend. But you're also playing them at the home of the 12th man. This is your first road contest. And you're going to be playing in a very hostile environment. Can Spencer Rattler get to 0-9, get out of the 0-8 and get to 1-8? That's all we want, is a win on the board. It feels feasible to pull this off, but I feel like the Saints have to answer a lot of questions, namely on the offensive line. The backup that filled in for Trevor Penning, he's out. You got a lot of other players that are going to be out or very much, limited in what they can do. Get Trevor Penning, he was able to start playing. Chase Young, he's out. Fuaga, he's more likely than not going to be out with that back injury. And even if he does play, How long does he play? What kind of rotation is he going to have with his backup? Like, we're going to be sitting here on Monday looking back at this game. I feel like the quarterback play is going to be the big headline, and the offensive line, how they hold up. So I think we got to go with the Seattle Seahawks winning this game, as much as it pains me to say it, because 0-3, that kind of means your hopes of playoffs, which feels a lot like the Jim Mora playoffs. We got to win a game, and that's what we're looking at right now. I feel like the Saints team, based off of what they've been able to do, and more or less also being cursed with some of the worst injury luck I've ever seen over the last couple of years, you have to start, figuring out what your future is without some of the guys that are getting a little bit longer in the tooth, like Cam Jordan, like Demario Davis. And Demario Davis is still looking good. One of the best free agent signings in the history of the New Orleans Saints on the defensive side of the ball, because we all know Drew Brees is the best on the offensive side. Demario Davis, I think, still is the defensive choice on that, because he has been a godsend to that front seven. Your secondary's taking hits left, right, and center, so you've got to kind of figure all that out. And hopefully this team can kind of get things going in the right direction. But I feel like it's going to be a struggle in this one against the Seahawks. If they win, great, because that means Spencer Rattler gets the monkey off his back, and he's able to focus on improving as the season progresses and getting even better, because he's looked good in the game so far. I think more in the 49ers game than he did in the opener against the Cardinals. But I think a lot of that was because a lot of procedural penalties and self-inflicted wounds. It was a death by 1,000 cuts type of game. That's how I've looked at the start of the 2025 season. But that's about going to do it for this edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Like I said, a little bit more of an express lane, streamlined edition. Appreciate you listening in as always. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit follow on the Spotify, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour. Also up on YouTube. Got some content going up on there on the regular. So until Monday, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the football. Take it easy.